It was the first day of spring semester at Lincoln High School, and the hallways were alive with the sounds of lockers slamming, students laughing, and footsteps echoing on the linoleum floors. Among the crowd, a girl named Maya Johnson walked slowly, clutching her backpack straps tightly, her eyes scanning the room with quiet alertness. She had just moved to town, and everything around her felt unfamiliar: the smell of the cafeteria, the chatter of students, the way the sunlight streamed through the tall windows. Maya was small in stature, but there was a certain intensity in her gaze, a calm confidence that few noticed at first glance. She had learned over the years to read people quickly, to sense intentions without words, and that skill often kept her out of unnecessary trouble. Yet, today felt different. The energy in the school was louder, heavier, almost as if it was testing her patience and resolve. She found her classroom and slipped into a seat near the corner, unpacking her books carefully, placing her notebooks in neat stacks. Across the room, some students were already whispering and glancing at her. One of them, a tall boy named Brandon, who seemed to carry his popularity like armor, smirked and nudged his friend, Tyler, whispering something that made them both chuckle. Maya's senses prickled, but she remained calm, pretending not to notice them. She had faced challenges before, in places far rougher than a school hallway, and she knew that patience was often more powerful than reacting immediately. During the first period, she focused on her teacher's instructions, jotting down notes neatly, ignoring the occasional glance or muttered remark from the other students. But when the bell rang for lunch, Maya's solitude was about to be tested. She carried her tray into the crowded cafeteria, looking for an empty table. The smell of pizza and popcorn filled the air, mingling with the laughter and chatter of her classmates. She spotted a small table near the window and made her way there, trying to move quietly, not drawing attention to herself. It didn't take long for Brandon and his friends to notice her again. They followed her slowly, whispering to each other, their footsteps matching hers, almost like a shadow. When Maya sat down, unpacking her lunch, she could feel their eyes on her, heavy and uncomfortable. She tried to focus on her food, but Brandon made his move, shoving her backpack off the bench with a loud thud. "Hey, new girl. Maybe you like a little attention," he said, his tone mocking, as Tyler laughed beside him. Maya looked up calmly, her eyes meeting Brandon's with steady confidence. She didn't smile, she didn't show fear, but her presence alone made the cafeteria seem smaller, as if the space around her tightened with quiet strength. "Please leave me alone," she said softly, but with a firmness that was difficult to ignore. Brandon laughed louder, clearly enjoying the reaction he thought he was getting. He leaned closer, his friends joining in, and grabbed her shoulders, pushing her lightly but with enough force to make her tray tip slightly. Some students gasped, while others watched, unsure if they should intervene. Maya's body tensed, her muscles remembering years of disciplined training in martial arts, in a sport where control and precision mattered more than raw strength. She had learned that showing her full ability could be dangerous in the wrong setting, and this was one of those moments. She stayed still, breathing evenly, letting Brandon tire himself with his show of power. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said quietly, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that made Brandon hesitate for a split second. Tyler and the other friends looked at her, noticing something different in her demeanor. There was no fear, no panic, only calm readiness, and that made them uneasy, though none of them admitted it. Brandon, feeling the slight challenge, smirked and tried to shove her again, thinking she would flinch or cry out. But Maya shifted her weight just slightly, not in a way that revealed her skill, but enough to make him lose his balance and stumble forward. A few students gasped again, and the teacher on duty, Mr. Harris, noticed the commotion and hurried over. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice firm, and Brandon stepped back quickly, pretending nothing had happened. Maya picked up her tray, smiled politely at Mr. Harris, and moved to another table, quietly eating her lunch as if nothing had occurred. But inside, she was aware that this was only the beginning. School could be a battlefield in its own way, full of unspoken challenges, where patience and intelligence matter just as much as physical strength. She knew that she would have to navigate these days carefully, learning who could be trusted, who posed danger, and how to stand her ground without unnecessary conflict. Still, there was a fire inside her that could not be ignored, a skill honed over years of dedication in martial arts that gave her an edge few would ever suspect. As the lunch period ended, Maya packed up her tray, her mind already planning the rest of her day. She noticed small details about her classmates, the way they interacted, the way they moved, the subtle hierarchies that determined who held power and who followed. Brandon and his friends glanced at her again, uncertain this time, as if sensing that she was not an ordinary target. She walked to her next class with her head held high, ignoring the whispers and stares, feeling a quiet satisfaction in knowing that strength came in many forms, not just the ones people expected. She didn't seek revenge, but she understood the importance of being ready, of standing firm when others tried to push her around. By the time the final bell rang, Maya had already learned a lot about Lincoln High, its routines, its social dynamics, and the subtle tension that existed beneath the surface of everyday school life. She had also learned that she would have to remain cautious but confident, using her intelligence, awareness, and skill to protect herself if needed. Brandon and his friends would likely try again, but Maya was ready in ways they could never imagine. Outside, the spring air was crisp and refreshing, and Maya walked home slowly, thinking about her new environment, the challenges ahead, and the quiet strength she carried inside her. She knew that the days ahead would test her in ways beyond physical confrontations, testing her patience, her mind, and her heart. But she also knew that she was prepared, not just because of her skill in martial arts, but because of the resilience she had built through life's hardships. And as she looked at the sun setting over the town, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maya felt a quiet sense of determination. She was not just the new girl. She was someone who could face challenges with courage, intelligence, and strength, even if nobody knew the full extent of it yet. The hallway battles, the whispered taunts, and the cafeteria shoves were only small pieces of the bigger picture, and Maya was ready to navigate it all with a calm mind and a steady heart, knowing that one day, everyone would realize that strength was not always visible, and sometimes, the quietest person carried the most power. The next day at Lincoln High, the tension in the hallways felt thicker, almost tangible, as if the walls themselves whispered that something was different. Maya Johnson walked through the crowded corridors with the same quiet confidence she always carried, but she could feel Brandon's gaze following her like a shadow. He hadn't forgotten yesterday, and neither had Tyler or the others. Maya's intuition told her that their curiosity was growing into something more aggressive, a test of limits they didn't yet understand. She tried to ignore the whispers and the occasional snickers, focusing instead on keeping her balance between blending in and staying aware of her surroundings. During her first class, she noticed subtle glances from Brandon across the room, and though she remained calm, a flicker of caution passed through her mind. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also knew that being underestimated could be dangerous if she wasn't careful. By the time lunch arrived, the cafeteria was buzzing with students swapping stories, showing pictures on their phones, and laughing over small jokes. Maya carried her tray toward her usual spot near the window, hoping for a quiet meal, but Brandon and his friends were already there, leaning casually against the tables like they owned the place. "Well, if it isn't the quiet little fighter," Brandon said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby students. Tyler snickered behind him, and a few of their friends joined in, whispering among themselves. Maya's heart didn't race. She had trained herself to control her emotions, to remain steady even in tense situations. She set her tray down and sat, facing them indirectly, keeping her posture relaxed but ready, knowing that in a few seconds, she might have to defend herself not just physically, but mentally as well. Brandon leaned over and yanked her backpack toward him again, more forceful this time. "What, are you just gonna sit there and take it?" he said, his tone mocking but edged with something sharper than yesterday. Maya slowly looked up at him, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I don't want trouble," she said softly, but there was an unspoken warning in her words. Brandon frowned slightly, as if he expected her to beg or get scared, but she didn't. Instead, she shifted her weight just slightly, so subtly that no one noticed except herself, a movement that reminded her muscles of balance and leverage she had learned in countless hours of training. Brandon tried again to push her, but his movements felt awkward, as if he couldn't quite get the right angle. Students nearby started murmuring, sensing the tension in the air. Maya remained calm, letting the moment stretch, aware of every small motion around her, the way Brandon's fingers tensed, the slight hesitation in Tyler's laughter, the way some students edged closer to see what would happen next. Then, in an instant, Maya acted not with aggression, but with precise control. She shifted her stance, gently using her momentum to guide Brandon off balance, making him stumble slightly without hurting him. A few students gasped, whispering among themselves, surprised at how quickly the situation had changed. Brandon froze for a moment, his confidence shaken by something he didn't understand. Maya didn't speak, she just looked at him calmly, her posture steady, her eyes unflinching. It was a quiet message, one of awareness and readiness, not violence. The teacher on duty, Miss Carter, arrived quickly, asking, "Is everything okay here?" Brandon straightened up, trying to hide his embarrassment, and muttered, "Yeah, fine," while Tyler tried to smother his laughter. Maya smiled politely at Miss Carter, saying, "Yes, everything's fine," and went back to her lunch as if nothing had happened. Inside, however, Maya felt a surge of determination. She realized that these encounters weren't just about physical skill, they were about perception, about showing strength without unnecessary conflict, about teaching others that she could not be pushed around. After lunch, she walked to her next class, noticing that Brandon and his friends lingered, whispering and casting glances her way. She didn't look back, but she was aware that they were trying to plan their next move. The hallways of Lincoln High suddenly seemed like a place of hidden challenges, where each step could bring a new test of patience, courage, and control. Maya's mind wandered briefly to the training she had undergone in martial arts, remembering the hours of discipline, the strict routines, and the focus on self-control. Every punch, every kick, every block had taught her not just how to defend herself, but how to remain calm under pressure, how to anticipate the actions of others, and how to maintain strength without unnecessary aggression. These lessons were now more valuable than ever. She entered her science classroom and took her seat, keeping an eye on the door as students filed in. The day moved slowly, each period filled with notes, experiments, and quiet observations. Maya noticed small details about her classmates, the way some avoided eye contact with her, the way others tried to act casual while clearly aware of her presence. By the time the final period ended, she realized that the day had been a series of subtle tests, each interaction gauging her reactions, her courage, and her composure. Outside, the air was warmer, the sun soft against her face, but she felt no relief from the tension. Brandon and his friends were still nearby, lingering as if waiting for another opportunity. Maya walked calmly, her steps measured, her mind planning her route home carefully to avoid unnecessary confrontation. She knew that she could handle any situation if it came to that, but she also knew that a careful approach could prevent trouble before it even started. As she passed the park on her way home, she noticed children playing, dogs running, and the simple joys of life continuing outside the school walls. It reminded her why she needed to remain balanced, to face challenges without letting them define her, and to use her strength wisely. That evening, at home, she reflected on the events of the day. She understood that Lincoln High was not just a place of learning but a place where courage, intelligence, and awareness mattered as much as physical ability. She knew that Brandon's attempts to intimidate her would continue, but she was ready to face them not with anger, but with skill, patience, and precise control. Maya spent the rest of the evening stretching and practicing quietly, refining her movements, preparing herself mentally and physically for whatever challenges the next day might bring. She thought about her family, her training, and the lessons she had learned in life, that strength was not about showing off, that power could be quiet, and that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. As she went to bed, she felt a mixture of determination and calm. She was ready for the days ahead, ready to navigate the complex social dynamics of school while maintaining her inner strength. Maya knew that her journey at Lincoln High was just beginning, and that each encounter with bullies like Brandon and his friends was an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more confident. She understood that courage came in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest battles were not fought with fists alone, but with awareness, patience, and the quiet power that lay within. Outside her window, the night was calm, but Maya could feel the storm of challenges that tomorrow might bring. She was ready to meet it head-on, not with fear, but with skill, determination, and the knowledge that she was capable of far more than anyone could imagine. The following week at Lincoln High, Maya Johnson could feel the tension in the air growing heavier with each passing day. Brandon and his friends had not forgotten the small lesson she had given them in the cafeteria, but rather than retreating, they seemed to grow more determined to test her, driven by curiosity and the challenge of someone who did not easily back down. As Maya walked through the crowded hallways, she noticed whispers trailing behind her, a mixture of admiration, fear, and speculation about the quiet new girl who had stood her ground. She stayed composed, keeping her shoulders back and her head high, aware that every movement she made was being observed, analyzed, and judged by those around her. During first period, she sat quietly in science class, jotting down notes and performing her calculations with precision, all the while sensing Brandon's gaze from across the room. It was subtle, a kind of attention that was both threatening and hesitant, and Maya understood that he was searching for a reaction. She did not give him one. Instead, she focused on the lesson, her pen moving across the page, her mind analyzing more than just chemistry formulas. It was analyzing behavior, patterns, and intentions. When lunch came, the cafeteria was louder than usual, filled with the clatter of trays, bursts of laughter, and the occasional shout from students joking with friends. Maya walked in confidently, tray in hand, and spotted her usual table near the window. But today, Brandon and his friends had positioned themselves strategically, sitting in a way that blocked her usual route. "Well, look who it is," Brandon said as he rose, a smirk on his face, his presence larger than usual. Looks like someone wants a little attention again. Tyler laughed beside him, and the others whispered among themselves, sensing that something exciting was about to unfold. Maya took a deep breath and smiled faintly, not with fear, but with quiet readiness. She didn't want trouble, yet she was prepared to act if necessary. As she approached, Brandon stepped forward suddenly, grabbing her backpack and pulling it toward him with more force than before. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, her body responding instinctively to the movement, every muscle ready, every sense alert. "Back off," she said calmly, her voice soft but firm. Brandon laughed, clearly expecting her to panic or retreat. Instead, Maya shifted her weight subtly, barely noticeable, using his own momentum to make him stumble back. Some students gasped quietly, a few others exchanged nervous glances, realizing that Maya was not an ordinary girl. Brandon's expression faltered, confusion and frustration mixing in his eyes as he realized he could not intimidate her as easily as he had thought. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice sharp but uncertain. Maya did not answer immediately. She simply looked at him calmly, her posture relaxed yet ready, her eyes conveying a silent strength that left no room for further mischief. Tyler and the others whispered among themselves, clearly unsettled by the change in atmosphere. The teacher on duty, Mr. Harris, approached quickly after noticing the sudden shift in tension. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice authoritative. Brandon straightened up, trying to regain control of the situation, and muttered something about being fine, while Tyler attempted to smother his laughter nervously. Maya smiled politely at Mr. Harris, replying, "Yes, everything is fine," and returned to her lunch without a hint of anger or fear. Despite the calm appearance, Maya's mind was sharp, analyzing the dynamics at play, understanding that her presence alone was a lesson for those who tried to bully her. She realized that confidence, composure, and subtle control often spoke louder than words or aggression. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes, notes, and quiet observation. During gym class, Maya noticed Brandon attempting to show off in front of others, throwing balls aggressively and taunting classmates with careless remarks. Maya kept her focus on her own performance, running drills with precision, practicing coordination and control, all the while observing Brandon's behavior. She understood that he was testing not only her but also the limits of social power within the school. After gym, she returned to the locker room to change, aware that Brandon and his friends were likely watching from a distance, curious about her reactions. Maya kept calm, knowing that any sign of fear would encourage further bullying. Instead, she moved with purpose, her body language confident, her every action conveying readiness and quiet strength. By the time the final bell rang, Maya had learned more about Lincoln High than she could have imagined in a single week. She understood the unspoken rules, the hierarchy of students, and the ways in which appearances could deceive. Brandon and his friends had not given up. They were persistent, stubborn, and eager to find weakness, but Maya was equally persistent, patient, and skilled at controlling the narrative without raising unnecessary alarms. As she walked home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the streets, she reflected on the subtle victories of the day. Each interaction, each careful movement, had reinforced her understanding that courage, intelligence, and self-control were as important as physical skill. She had avoided conflict while establishing her presence, demonstrating that strength was often quiet, measured, and deliberate. At home, Maya practiced quietly in her room, reviewing movements, stretches, and techniques she had learned over years of disciplined training in martial arts. She knew that these skills were not just about fighting, they were about control, awareness, and understanding how to navigate dangerous situations with intelligence. Her mind wandered briefly to her family and the lessons they had taught her: resilience, patience, and the power of inner strength. She realized that Lincoln High, despite its everyday routines and youthful distractions, was becoming a place where her abilities could be tested, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. Each day presented new challenges, and each encounter with bullies like Brandon was a chance to strengthen not just her body, but her resolve, her patience, and her understanding of people. Maya knew that it was not just about responding to aggression, but about maintaining composure, teaching others through example, and controlling situations with quiet authority. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, Maya sat by her window, reflecting on the events of the week. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had handled each challenge with calmness and intelligence, establishing her place without unnecessary confrontation. Yet she was also aware that the coming days would bring more tests, more subtle battles, and moments where her patience and skill would be crucial. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the strength in her body, the calm in her mind, and the clarity in her heart. Maya knew that she was not just surviving Lincoln High, she was learning, growing, and preparing for every obstacle with focus and precision. Her journey was far from over, and the quiet confidence she carried was her greatest weapon, one that others would slowly come to recognize in ways they never expected. Outside, the night was calm, but Maya could sense the undercurrents of tension and challenge that awaited her. She was ready, not with fear or anger, but with skill, patience, and a steady heart, understanding that the true measure of strength was in how one controlled not just the body, but the mind, and how one navigated the complexities of human behavior with intelligence, resilience, and grace. As she drifted to sleep, she knew that tomorrow would bring new tests, but she welcomed them, confident that her calm determination and quiet power would carry her through every obstacle Lincoln High might place in her path. The tension at Lincoln High had reached a new level by midweek, and Maya Johnson could feel it in every corridor, every classroom, and even in the quiet moments before the morning bell. Brandon and his friends had grown bolder, testing limits in ways that seemed harmless at first, but Maya knew better. She moved through the hallways with her usual calm, her backpack snug on her shoulders, her eyes quietly observing every movement and whisper. She noticed students glancing at her, some with curiosity, some with admiration, and some with a hint of fear. Brandon was clearly becoming frustrated by his inability to provoke her, and today, he seemed determined to challenge her directly in a way he thought he could control. At lunch, the cafeteria buzzed as usual, trays clattering, conversations overlapping, and laughter ringing out in short bursts. Maya walked toward her usual table near the window, but before she could sit, Brandon stepped in front of her, blocking her path with a smirk that he thought was intimidating. "So, new girl," he said, his voice louder than necessary, "are you going to keep ignoring us, or do you want to play?" Tyler laughed beside him, and the others gathered nearby, eager to see a reaction. Maya paused, calmly meeting Brandon's eyes, and smiled faintly, her posture relaxed yet full of quiet readiness. She did not speak aggressively, but her gaze carried a strength that made some of the students around them whisper softly. "I don't want trouble," she said calmly, her voice steady, yet every word held the weight of controlled power. Brandon's smirk faltered slightly. He stepped closer, shoving her backpack roughly this time, expecting her to flinch or yell. Maya's body reacted instinctively, her muscles remembering countless hours of disciplined martial arts training. She shifted her weight subtly, using his momentum against him, moving him just enough so he stumbled forward slightly, not hurt, but surprised. Students around them gasped softly, and some leaned forward to see what would happen next. Brandon blinked, confusion flashing across his face as he realized he had underestimated her once again. Tyler whispered something, and the others exchanged nervous glances. The teacher on duty, Miss Carter, arrived quickly, her expression serious. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, stepping between Maya and Brandon. Brandon straightened quickly, muttering that it was fine, while Maya calmly replied, "Yes, everything's fine," her tone polite but unwavering. As Miss Carter walked away, Brandon's friends nudged him, frustrated by his inability to intimidate her, but he was not ready to give up. Maya took her tray to her table near the window, sitting quietly as her heart remained steady, her breathing calm. Inside, she felt a rush of determination and focus. She knew the next encounter could escalate further, and she had to be prepared for any sudden movements, any push or shove, while keeping control over herself and the situation. During the next class, she noticed subtle signals from Brandon and his friends. They were planning, watching, and waiting. Maya's mind worked quickly, analyzing patterns, predicting actions, and preparing responses that would keep her safe and in control. She realized that these moments were not just about self-defense, they were about teaching respect, setting boundaries, and showing strength without aggression. After school, the situation escalated further. As Maya walked through the parking lot, Brandon and his friends stepped out from behind some cars, cornering her near the school entrance. Their postures were aggressive, their expressions daring her to react. "So, the quiet fighter finally walks alone," Brandon said, a hint of challenge in his voice. Tyler and the others laughed nervously, sensing tension but unsure how far to push. Maya stopped, standing tall, her body relaxed but ready, her eyes scanning every angle, every movement. She understood that fear would give them power, but calm and control would take it away. Brandon reached out suddenly, trying to grab her arm, but Maya shifted gracefully, using his momentum to move him slightly off balance, enough to surprise him without causing injury. The action was so quick and precise that Tyler and the others gasped, whispering among themselves. Brandon froze, anger and disbelief mixing on his face. Maya's stance remained steady, her voice calm as she said, "Stop this. It's not worth it." Her quiet authority carried more weight than shouting or fighting ever could. Slowly, Brandon stepped back, his confidence shaken, and Tyler and the others followed, muttering excuses and trying to regain composure. Maya exhaled softly, feeling the release of tension but remaining alert, knowing the day was not yet over and that she had to maintain awareness until she was safely home. She walked calmly toward the street, her steps measured, every movement deliberate. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about the power of presence, composure, and subtle skill, showing that true strength often revealed itself in the quietest, most controlled moments. At home, Maya reflected on the day while stretching and practicing quietly in her room. She knew that what had happened outside the school gates was just a fraction of what could come, but she also knew she had handled it with intelligence and precision. Each movement, each decision, each controlled response reinforced her confidence and her ability to navigate challenges with poise. She thought about her family, her training, and the countless hours she had spent learning to control her mind and body. These moments, she realized, were not just tests of skill but of character, patience, and courage. That evening, she looked out her window at the calm night sky, stars beginning to twinkle above. Despite the challenges and intimidation she faced, Maya felt a quiet pride in her ability to remain composed, to show strength without aggression, and to protect herself without causing harm. She understood that Lincoln High would continue to test her, but she also knew that each challenge made her stronger, wiser, and more confident. The quiet victories she achieved maintaining control, demonstrating skill subtly, and handling bullies with intelligence were lessons far greater than any confrontation could teach. As she prepared for bed, Maya felt a renewed sense of determination, knowing that she was capable of handling whatever came next. Brandon and his friends might try again, but they would not catch her off guard, and she had proven that strength was not only in force but in awareness, composure, and the quiet power within her. Outside, the night was calm, but Maya's mind remained sharp, planning her strategies, reflecting on her victories, and preparing for future encounters. She knew that the true challenge was not just the bullies, but mastering herself, and in that, she had already begun to excel. The week had shown her the importance of patience, intelligence, and courage, and she felt ready to face any test that Lincoln High might place before her. With a deep breath and a sense of quiet pride, Maya turned off her lamp, confident that her presence, her skill, and her calm determination would continue to guide her through every challenge, every encounter, and every difficult moment yet to come. She understood now that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all, and that quiet strength, when wielded with precision and control, was far more powerful than aggression or fear. And as she drifted to sleep, Maya felt ready, not just for tomorrow, but for every challenge that life might present, knowing that her courage, intelligence, and skill would always be her greatest allies. The tension at Lincoln High had built to a peak by the end of the week, and Maya Johnson felt it with every step she took through the hallways that morning. Brandon and his friends had become bolder each day, testing limits, whispering plans, and looking for any sign of weakness. Maya, however, remained calm, her mind alert and her body ready, aware that this might be the day when everything changed. During first period, she noticed Brandon's eyes on her, flicking from her face to her movements, searching for an opportunity. She focused on her lesson but kept her awareness wide, noting the small details, the angle of his stance, the way his friends leaned slightly forward, the tension in his shoulders. By lunchtime, the cafeteria was louder than usual, filled with chatter, laughter, and the smell of pizza and sandwiches. Maya carried her tray with quiet confidence, heading toward her usual table, but this time, Brandon and his friends had arranged themselves deliberately, blocking her path and forming a small circle around her. "Looks like someone's brave today," Brandon said, stepping closer, his smirk sharper, his tone laced with challenge. Tyler and the others laughed nervously, sensing that something was about to happen, yet unsure how far to push. Maya stopped, standing tall, her posture relaxed but firm, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I don't want trouble," she said softly, her voice calm, but her presence radiated an unspoken strength. Brandon reached out suddenly, trying to grab her arm and intimidate her, but Maya moved with precise control, stepping aside and using his momentum to make him stumble forward slightly, enough to surprise him but not to harm him. The cafeteria fell silent for a moment, students watching with wide eyes as the quiet new girl demonstrated her control and skill in a way that left no doubt she was not to be trifled with. Brandon's face flushed with a mix of frustration and disbelief, and his friends exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had underestimated her yet again. The teacher on duty, Mr. Harris, approached quickly, sensing the intensity in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm. Brandon straightened up, muttering that it was nothing, while Maya replied politely, "Everything is fine, sir," her tone calm but resolute. As Mr. Harris walked away, Brandon's friends nudged him, whispering, unsure how to regain control of the situation, and Brandon's smirk faltered. Maya set her tray on the table, sitting gracefully, her mind already analyzing the day, the dynamics, and the potential challenges ahead. The subtle victories she had achieved so far had taught her more than she could have imagined about courage, patience, and the quiet power of self-control. The afternoon classes passed in a blur, filled with notes, experiments, and quiet observations, Maya carefully balancing participation with awareness, observing the interactions around her, and noting who might pose challenges in the future. She understood that strength was not just physical, it was mental, emotional, and social, and she had learned to master all three. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Maya walked toward the parking lot with measured steps, fully aware that Brandon and his friends might attempt one last challenge before the week ended. And sure enough, as she reached the side exit, they stepped out from behind the building, their movements deliberate and confident, attempting to corner her. "Thought we'd have a little fun before you go home," Brandon said, his voice trying to mask the uncertainty that had begun to creep in. Tyler and the others flinched slightly, sensing that this encounter might finally reveal more than they had expected. Maya stopped, standing tall, her body relaxed but ready, every sense alert, every instinct sharp. She did not flinch, she did not raise her voice, but her presence alone made the small group pause. Brandon lunged slightly, trying to grab her again, but Maya reacted with a fluid, controlled motion, stepping to the side and using his momentum to guide him forward just enough to unbalance him. The movement was subtle but precise, and it startled Brandon and his friends, leaving them momentarily frozen. Maya's calm voice cut through the tension, "Stop this. It's not worth it." Her words, soft yet authoritative, carried more weight than any shout or gesture could. Slowly, Brandon straightened, his anger mixed with confusion, realizing he had been outmaneuvered without her needing to hurt him. Tyler and the others took a step back, muttering excuses, while Maya remained steady, her gaze unwavering. The lesson was clear: she was not someone to be pushed around, and strength did not always have to be loud or violent to be recognized. The quiet demonstration of skill, patience, and control left the group stunned, and as they backed away, Maya felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She continued walking home, her steps confident, aware that she had faced the peak challenge of the week without losing composure. On the way, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point: her training, her family, the lessons of patience and courage, and the understanding that true strength was not in dominance, but in control and wisdom. That evening, at home, Maya reviewed her training quietly, practicing movements, stretching, and meditating, reinforcing the discipline that had allowed her to navigate Lincoln High with confidence. She thought about the bullies, about Brandon and his friends, and realized that they, too, had learned something important about respect, courage, and understanding that appearances could be deceiving. Maya's heart felt light yet strong, filled with the knowledge that she could handle challenges not by anger or aggression, but through awareness, skill, and calm determination. As night fell, she looked out her window at the stars beginning to twinkle in the sky, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. The week had tested her patience, courage, and skill, and she had met every challenge with composure, intelligence, and precision. Brandon and his friends would think twice before attempting to intimidate anyone again, not because of fear alone, but because they had seen the quiet power of someone who was confident, skilled, and in control. Maya felt proud, not of dominance, but of the way she had handled herself, maintaining respect for herself and for others, proving that true strength was a combination of mind, body, and heart. She knew the days ahead would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them with calm confidence, prepared for whatever Lincoln High might present. In her room, she finally relaxed completely, closing her eyes with a smile, feeling the satisfaction of having overcome the week with grace and intelligence. She realized that courage was not about fighting, but about knowing when and how to respond, about being aware, and about standing firm without losing composure. Her journey at Lincoln High had shown her that respect, control, and quiet strength were more powerful than aggression, and that even the most determined bullies could be managed with skill, patience, and wisdom. Maya drifted to sleep that night with a sense of peace, knowing she had proven to herself and others that strength could be quiet but unmistakable, that courage could be calm but unyielding, and that intelligence, discipline, and composure were the greatest allies anyone could have. And in the stillness of her room, under the soft glow of the night sky, Maya understood fully that she was capable of handling any challenge, facing any obstacle, and walking through life with confidence, courage, and a heart strong enough to remain kind yet firm, gentle yet unstoppable, and ready for whatever the future might hold.